Hello, fellow Araxians. Commander Cyrious here. Welcome to the Principles of Gunplay. Ignore a game title for a minute. Has this ever been you in a first-person shooter? Or let's even take it a step further. Not just asking, but genuinely frustrated. You love the concept of the game, but it's completely unfun because you can't find fair fights. And maybe you've even tried asking for help, either in-game or on a subreddit. And a lot of times you're met with responses that in so many words say this, or this guy even made a Reddit account just to say this. Now, even though it's short and sweet, this is good, accurate advice. But is it helpful? It makes it sound like it's a one-step process. You have this problem? Boom. Move to here? Solved. Get good, aim better, hit the head, hit 80-80 a lot. No problems, you're just as good as anyone else. The reality is the gap between these two stages is massive. It's something more akin to this. Now you can close this gap, but there are a lot of steps between it. And that is what this series on the principles of gunplay is going to do for you. It's going to teach you about basic mechanical things that you can do that are going to set you on the right path. Visibility, sensitivity, video settings, and then we'll move into the non-mechanical things. Maneuvering, recoil control, situational awareness, aiming. This series is the bridge for that gap that links the new player frustrations to the good advice but may not have tools or descriptors on how to get there. Now we'll be moving through this series focused around Planetside 2, but many of these principles are not game specific. Reducing your input latency or keeping your frames high will help you in any number of first-person shooter titles. This series is about building a good base of knowledge of how to approach first-person shooter games in general. If you have any issues translating some of these concepts to other titles, please leave that down in the comments, and I can get to videos that are more specific regarding video settings or other topics on the title you're interested in. So welcome, soldiers. Class is now in session. A quick reminder, these videos aren't sponsored by a company selling a product. Instead, they're sponsored by generous viewers like you. People that like my videos and want to support my ability to make more in the future were kind enough to hit the join button on YouTube and became a member of the Cyrious Army. Thank you, soldiers, for your continued support, and if you want to help the Cyrious Army rise, please consider enlisting today by hitting that join button. So, our lesson for today is sensitivity. As we travel towards becoming a better shooter, we need to eliminate things that are going to impede our ability to track targets. And having good mouse sensitivity settings is a basic tenet of that. And our first goal is making sure you have a 1-to-1 input ratio. That means for every inch you move your mouse physically, there is a specific change in your reticle on screen. If you move faster, it moves faster. If you move slower, it moves slower, but the distance stays the same. Now, something that comes up when I promote 1-to-1 movement on your mouse is, hey Cyrious, I play this crazy arena shooter, or I play Ambusher LA with hipfire carbines and a Punisher. If you want to go out there and do these crazy spins with 1 centimeter 360s, great, but that is different gameplay than you're seeing here. It's different gameplay than your average PUBG, Apex Legends match. It is generally very contra to building good tracking muscle memory. So to get started here, we're going to go to your Windows mouse settings first. I'm on Windows 10 here. Yours might look a little bit different, but you're going into settings, you're looking for your devices, and you're looking for mouse. The modern interface probably gives you a 0 through 20. You should be at 10 right in the middle. If you click additional mouse options, you're going to see the underlying screen that is an older version of it. And traditionally, the 1-to-1 ratio setting was always 6 slots in right in the middle between slow and fast on pointer speed. Now that I've shown you all this, I'm going to tell you why it doesn't matter. Next, I want you to go in-game under General Settings, go to Use Raw Mouse Input. This will bypass any acceleration that the Windows software sets and just use what comes from the mouse. You should be able to find this setting on basically any game, but I'm paranoid, so I like to go in and set it in Windows as a 1-to-1 ratio, and then make sure it's set in the games as well. Now you're getting a glimpse at my sensitivity settings here. I often get asked for my user options file or my sensitivity settings. And this footage without any other context is basically worthless. I'm a strong believer in that you can use someone else's as a jumping off point, but you really need to come to your own sensitivity settings. And the first thing you need to take into consideration is the user's DPI on their mouse. So yes, that is my sensitivity settings, but I run 1200 DPI. If you're running 5000 DPI, those settings will behave completely different for you. So if you really want to get a feel for how I set my settings, make sure your DPI is at 1200 and then try those settings. But you do you. Members of the community have done testing that suggested that using 800 DPI on the mouse is the best to reduce input latency. And then after you set that, you should go work on your in-game sensitivity settings. For me, I haven't seen a significant input latency difference between 800 or 1200 DPI. I see massive input latency differences when I start messing with the actual graphical settings. One other really advanced trick you can do is some mice have the ability to toggle their DPI on the fly. So you could set a button to toggle to a higher DPI, and then if you got hit with a concussion grenade, for example, you could jack up your sensitivity to try to fight through that slow effect. While I have a second button enabled, I don't actually have a button assigned to the DPI shift, so I don't use this feature. So, you know how to take acceleration off your mouse. You understand how it's important to balance your mouse DPI with the in-game sensitivity settings. You can't just go grab someone else's user option files and expect it to perform like it does for that person. Now, I want to get into sensitivity interacting with your gameplay, but there's one other technical part of sensitivity I want to talk through. You might start hearing terms like 8cm 360. What this is a way to make mouse sensitivity universal across games. It measures the distance it takes to move your mouse to complete one full revolution in-game. So in a world where there's all these different sensitivity settings, DPI settings, you could calculate what your distance to turn one circle in-game is, and then be able to speak universally on the topic to any person or in any game. I'm going to leave a link down in the description to a mouse sensitivity converter calculator. So if you want to figure out what you like playing at and then convert it between games, you can. Okay, now we can really bring sensitivity into game. The general rule of thumb is to bring your sensitivity down. Your average mouse pad is not big enough for gaming. If you are playing on a pad, you should be looking for a gaming mouse pad, which is oversized compared to an average one. Personally, I play directly on my desk. I like having all the space and not falling off a pad. Sometimes it's still not enough room. But this is how you maximize your ability to track targets. If your sensitivity is too high, you're going to be battling over aiming. That is, you try to snap to a target, but you aim past them, and then you have to recorrect back, and then sometimes you even have to recorrect a third or a fourth time. Having high sensitivity does not allow precision when tracking targets or flicking to targets. When you hear tracking, it refers to your ability to keep damage on a moving target. When you hear about flicking to target, it's target acquisition and putting damage downrange on them. This is most often associated with sniping, where you go from target recognition to headshot kill extremely rapidly. But the bottom line is the flick is the acquisition, getting reticle on target. The tracking is keeping the reticle on target as it moves. Let's take a look at this fight. I step out, I see an initial threat, engage it. It disappears, and then I notice the light assault on the roof. Now, the sensitivity topic goes very hand in hand with actual aiming. It'd be worth breaking this down again there, but for now, we're just going to speak about sensitivity. So, this is my moment of recognition. Now, let's see the flick, the acquisition, and the engagement. Not terrible. I feel like the flick was a little bit slow, but this is where defining a good sensitivity and then building muscle memory on top of that will really change engagements for you. Let's take a look at it going a little bit slower. This is really not a very large movement, probably only about 10 degrees on the screen. So imagine if you had, for example, a 2 centimeter 360. It's a very high sensitivity. You would basically have to make this adjustment with 1 millimeter of mouse travel. That's just not a realistic ask of your muscle coordination. Having a few more millimeters to work is going to make a big difference. Now you can see a little bit of over-aiming here, but at least it was only once and not 3 or 4 times. This is where having that good sensitivity foundation that stays the same is really important as we move into aim training later on. So soldiers, if I've sold you on the merits of reducing your sensitivity, please know this is not a silver bullet that you just do it and all of a sudden you're better. It's actually a situation where you do it and at first you're worse because your muscle memory is now totally out of whack. I don't think there's one right way to do it. I personally like gently adjusting to new sensitivities. If I feel like my tracking's just not there, I'm seeing a lot of extra over-aiming, I'm going to drop my sensitivity a little bit and steadily recreate muscle memory at that new lower sensitivity setting. Other people are going to be like, why waste the time? Just find a pro with a good sensitivity setting, put it there, and then immediately start building that muscle memory, even though it's going to be so hard at first. I don't think there's a right way to do it, just as long as you start working at it, even though it feels intimidating and feels bad. I see people that have effectively given up shooting at targets that aren't standing still, and they could never even dream of shooting a target out of the air. But I assure you, if you start with the fundamentals, that is having a good canvas, a good desk or mouse pad to work on where you can move your mouse over a very large area, and decrease your sensitivity so your hand-eye coordination actually has room with your mouse to make the adjustments you need to. Once we get to that aim video, you'll be picking those light assaults out of the air, no problem. Okay, soldiers, that is going to be it for me on sensitivity. The next video is going to be on settings, which is complementary to this one. We've already talked about your visibility. Once we have your sensitivity and settings all set, that's when we can really dive into how do you train yourself to be good at aiming. I'm going to give you one more look at my sensitivity settings. If you want to start there, please remember I use 1200 DPI on my mouse. There will also be a link to my user option files down in the description if you want to look from those. I keep one as standard definition, potato mode really, and one is high def. But that is all for now, fellow Araxians. I am Commander Cyrious, and until next time, I will see you Planetside.